Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jonathan Blackburn. I will be hosting a webinar today on advanced lighting and video tricks. Thank you for joining me today. In today's webinar, this is something new that I'm trying this month. We're trying to focus a little bit more on some of the features of the application. So today we'll be talking a little bit more about lightings, how to achieve great lightings and great effects inside your projects in, again, as little time as possible, because this is one of the goals of the application. Before we start, the application we're using for the webinar today is called Zoom. If you have any questions during the webinar, you should see somewhere in your screen there should be a chat option. So if you have any questions, just go in the chat and type your question. Please don't wait until the end for your questions, as in most cases I prefer if it's still in the same subject as what we're talking about at the moment. So what I'll do now, I'll just start sharing my whole screen here, so you see everything. So as you can see now, this is a project that I have prepared for today's demonstration. So most of the materials have been picked already. All we have to do is set up the lights. So even before we start with placing lights and playing with that, just want to give a couple of tricks, about the whole room basically. And since we're talking about advanced lighting, to get better effects, always put a ceiling inside your project. Always put a floor as well. Otherwise, you'll just see through it. If you don't have a ceiling, then you cannot really play with the sun, and the sun adds a lot of realism to any projects. If possible, always try to close the walls around you. So, like in a project like this one, for example, I just went a bit too fast. But, if I look on all sides, I just closed all my rooms. So that means that, all of the light that should be appearing inside my project comes from within my project. There's no outdoor light coming in. So they'll be helping with that. So in this project right now, I believe I've got two lights already that I've I'll just turn it off. So we just start with absolutely no lights at all. So one thing you realize now is that there's no lights inside my job, but it's not it's not very dark. And the reason behind that is because of the ambient intensity. So this is a setting, I believe everyone in the webinar today has been a user of Spaces, so I will not go into every single details. But ambient intensity, you see, if I turn it off completely, it will be just pitch dark, very dark inside my project. So the only lights that we see are just reflections from the outside, for example. So the ambient intensity, though, will not create any shadows or reflections. So, if I'm only playing with the ambient intensity, most of the materials will seem dead, meaning that there's no reflection or anything in front of them. So to get that, that's when we start playing with the lights. So to do that in the project, I'll just start adding my lights. I always like to separate my lights in two different categories. One that I will call the utilitarian lights, or the physical light placements. So that means in this example, I've got suspended lights over my table, so there should be some light effect underneath it. That's kind of obvious. Those type of lights will be also the ones that we put underneath upper cabinets or in openings or things like that. So in this case, you see I've got my lights already there, and I would probably just go right here in my opening and add a couple of lights. You can add lights whether you're working with SketchUp or Cabinet Vision. You can add your lights inside SketchUp or Cabinet Vision, or you can also add them here. So for those who are a little bit less familiar with the function now, when we're in the light mode, you can just click here on the light bulb with the plus sign inside it, and you simply just click, wherever you want to place your light. So like that. You can also use L on your keyboard. So if you just hit L on the keyboard and then click, it will just add one more light. So, and in this case, I guess that's pretty much all the lights that I would add. So normally I will just start by adjusting those lights, because those are, they have actual jobs. So they should give some more special effects. And then after that, I'll start working with more of my ambient lighting effects. So in the case, for example, actually, before I start adjusting those, what I'll do, I'll just add one more light, let's say like here, and show you some of the differences between the different lights. So let me just move that up a little bit, and I'll turn it around. Like that. So basically, just to explain the different types of lights. So like the first one that we have, this is the spotlight. So the spotlight is really a cone shape that starts from a small point here on the top and goes wider as we go down. When you have the spotlight selected, you can go and play with the intensity. So like how intense that light will be. Then you've got the range as well. So the range is how far from that light objects will be affected. Then you have the angle. So, you know, if I go and just show you a little bit more about the range again, so you see now like objects from like far and close will be affected or not by that. One other thing that you might be seeing as well is that inside the application, we have a function called the Eye Adaptation Tool. And this is really meant to mimic the focal opening inside a camera. So that means if you've got too much lights coming in, like the I think it's called the aperture or something like that, it would just bring less light inside your screen. So it kind of just readjusts everything around it. So, you know, if I put that light like very intense, you see everything else around it will become like very dark. And so, you know, like the software will always kind of readjust like the overall lighting of what you're seeing. And then just coming back to those lights. So we've got the angle, where you can make it bigger or smaller. Then we've got a temperature. So on the far left would be orange or almost red. On the right will be more of like a bluish color or a colder color. And the numbers that you're seeing there are the Kelvin numbers normally. So that's it. So what I'll do, I'll just turn this one off for the moment. So what I'll do in this case, for example, I'll just go and start adjusting those two lights. Something else that you probably all know by now, but all the lights that are at the same height level will be grouped together by default. You can always use Control on your keyboard to remove or add lights to your selection. So in the case of the lights over the table like that, what I'll do, I'll just start by increasing the range a little bit. So make sure that it goes all the way down to the floor. Maybe a little bit more intense. Then, you know, the angle right now it's not too bad, and temperature, I'll just make it a little bit warmer. And, you know, with the temperature, I always try to, you know, like the lights underneath the cabinets, I'll put them a little bit colder, on the table a little bit warmer. So if you play with different type, you know, different color temperature, it will just add a little bit more realism, like the reflections will have different colors, shadows as well. So that'll look pretty good. Then after that, I'll go and adjust the lights underneath here. And this is, you know, like for lights that are inside a box or underneath the cabinets, it will be pretty much the same thing. You know, you can either leave the spot like that and play with an angle. Something else that I really like to do whenever I'm underneath a cabinet, I'll just go and use the Ies Light Profile. So the Ies Light Profiles are like masks that we put in front of the lights. So instead of having lights that goes everywhere, it will just let light go through like some specific direction. So when you play around with that, you'll see like different effects like that on the wall. So, you know, like for lights underneath the cabinets, that'll be something that looks pretty good. If you're looking more into like the LED light effect, I'd suggest just going with like the rear point light. And a little trick for people that don't know that, but you know, if you want just to go back to with like no profile, you can just click here on this one. So it just goes back to the regular point light. So like I said, like for like underneath the cabinets, mostly I'll just use a point light because it's like a ball of light and we'll just like emit light all like everywhere inside that box, and put like a very short range because I don't really want that light to be affecting, you know, objects on the floor, for example, or things like that. And also, you know, for when it's inside a box or even underneath the cabinets, what I really like to just bring them down just a little bit. So like that, we make sure we have light that goes like on the top panel as well, and it will just light up everything very nicely inside that that opening. And especially now, you know, that since we can move the lights around, it's always a good thing just to go and play a little bit until you get some nice shadows, or you know, you get some effect that you like. And even you know, when they're underneath the cabinet, sometimes I'll just bring bring them forward a little bit, like close to the front edge of the cabinet. Not too much, because otherwise they'll be you know, throwing up light on the top panels on the doors. But if you just keep them close from the front like that on the inside, and you know, and like that, you don't really have to put lights every you know, 2 inches, or like, what you're really looking for is really the effect of that light inside that room. Now I'll just go, forgot to put Chrome here. So now I've got my you know, like I said, my utilitarian light. So what I'll do after that, you know, I'll show you how to do it with as less lights as possible. So, you know, once I've got my real lights in a special position that I like, that should be there and people would expect to see there, I'll just go with lights that are called more like ambience, or like room type light. So normally what I'll do, and the trick that I use normally is that, you know, I'll just go basically where I would stand to look at the kitchen to take one of the viewpoints. So, you know, in this case, like this light here is just perfectly placed. So what I'll do, I'll just use that light here and position it about a high level, you know, like pretty much like at the same height as like the eye level inside the room, and then turn it into a point light and extend my range like that. So what it does basically is just like a light that looks very nice, that will just light up like a whole area. So like the whole corner of my room now is lit up with a point line. The reason, because, you know, to do that is mainly because it will create shadows when compared to the ambient lighting that does not create shadows. So it looks a little bit more real. Then probably just, you know, make it a little bit warmer like that. You know, when you do that, you just also look at the range of that light. So, you know, like basically this light should not really have to affect everything all the way up to that that wall on the other side. So, you know, you want it to be just a little bit more like local. And, you know, and since you add it at the eye level, what it does is that when we start shooting videos, for example, it will create a little bit more reflections. You will see like the lights like in the reflections in the door panels and in the windows, for example. And then in this case, what I'll do, I'll just go and add one more light. That will be like around like this corner, for example. And I'll just do the same thing, do a point light, bring it up about like same thing. Pretty much like the same type of like that. I have one question. Oh, the question here is about adding the lights in cabinet vision. You know, adding the lights in cabinet vision or adding the lights in spaces, like when you get to adjusting them, it's pretty much the same thing. So, you know, in cabinet vision, you can add your lights inside your cabinets, underneath the cabinets. You can add them on the ceiling. The only difference is that you're not adding them in spaces. There's no like big advantage of doing it one side or the other side, or like, in my opinion, because in spaces, when you put the light, you see the effect of that light right away. So in one sense, it makes it faster and easier to do it on this side instead of doing it on cabinet vision or even SketchUp for that reason. So yeah, so like that, you know, I've got all my lights, and probably because I've got my light here that is inserted on my ceiling, I'll just go and add one more light like about this. And again, you know, I don't really have to add like 20 lights here, like maybe because it's quite wide, I'll just put 3 like that. And again, you know, I don't have to leave, like most people will just leave like spotlights there, but in most cases, you know, just make them points, and by bringing it down like that just a little bit, so, you know, it will create like effects where you've got lights that goes like on top of the ceiling or other things, and you can also leave them as spots, for example. And I'll just go switch them, put like a wider angle. So, you know, like at this point, it really depends on what you're looking for and the effect, and you know, what that light should be looking like that. So maybe even wider like that. So now, you know, like if I turn off my light option and just go back to my ambient intensity again, you know, if I turn it off completely, now you'll see that you know, it's not dark anywhere because I've got lights that are just like lighting up the whole room. So now when you do that, you know, with the ambient intensity, like do not turn it off completely. Just, you know, like you can, normally what I'll do, I'll just start by adjusting the lights. And then after that, I go back to the ambient intensity and just lower it just a little bit. So, you know, it will increase a little bit and give more depth to the shadows and the corners in the room. So what I'll do after, I'll just go and add a skybox in that room. You know, this is something else that adds a lot of life to your project. You know, as soon as you have trees outside, you know, it looks like now it's not flying in the air, just in a real place. When you add that skybox, you know, like you can play with the exposure, and even the exposure of the skybox will influence, you know, because of the eye adaptation. You see, like now everything is a bit darker inside the room, so you know, it will influence. You can bring it down a little bit if you want to make it look a little bit more like night. And sometimes, you know, with the skybox, the exposure, you know, it would be pretty much the same thing as in real life. So, you know, if it's very bright inside and it's dark on the outside, then all of your windows will act more like mirrors. And if it's really bright on the outside, then you'll be able to see it more, even if it's bright as well on the inside. So with the skybox, I'll just like turn it around a little bit. So we have something like that. Now I'll go and start playing with the sun. So, you know, the sun is a light that is outside the project. So when I start playing with my direction, I kind of see it inside the room. I can play with intensity. I'll make it a little bit warmer, play with the elevation. You know, with the sun, normally what I'll try to do is just, you know, make sure that I hit as many objects as possible with my sun basically inside my project. So, you know, because the sun has like a really big impact as far as realism inside the project when you you move around. So, you know, I always just try to like that when you hit the chair legs, for example, and so it just creates a lot of life inside the project when you do that. Then, you know, we've got some other options that we've covered in previous webinars, but just to go again, like real quick, we've got the ambient occlusion. This is like the shadows that you see at the corners like that. So if I go and crank the intensity, you'll see it becomes like very dark. On some projects, sometimes when you work with stuff that is very white, you know, like sometimes you have ceiling is white, walls are white, cabinets are white, countertops are white, pretty much everything is white. Those types of projects, it's really hard to make them look right or light them up properly. So sometimes with the ambient occlusion, this is where you want to augment it just a little bit, so it adds a little bit more depth in the corners of objects. Then when I click here, we've got a sun shaft. The sun shaft is, you know, like that effect where when you look at the sun coming from the window, you'll see like the beams of lights. You should know also that those will be affected by the skybox. So if I turn it around, depending if I have trees or if I have ceiling, not trees or sky, I guess, like it will affect the sun shaft. So you can decide. And if you play with the exposure, same thing. So, you know, like the sun shaft is something I really enjoy. It looks beautiful when you record a video of your project as well, like that. Yeah, so basically that covers pretty much everything about the lights inside the project. So you know, like a couple of things to remember. You know, always close your room. Don't add too many lights for no reasons. It's better just to have a couple of lights that will be like, you know, placed accordingly in the right places than having like too many. And, you know, just to show you the example, you know, if I go and, for example, just turn off those lights like from here and turn off those here and even those, you see like my project still looks pretty good, you know, like all my lights right now. So, you know, like the ambient lighting will be more important in many cases than just like all the utilitarian ones. So, you know, like it's better just to play with those lights than pretty much any other lights in the project. So like that. So now I wanted to give you a couple of tricks about the video, you know, video recording and video points. first thing, like most people will have a tendency of, like inside this room, the entry is right there in the corner. So most people would have a tendency just to go in and start from that door. I would say, in real life, it makes sense because you kind of you have no choice. You cannot just walk inside a room from the opposite corner. But in a video, video walkthrough, it doesn't really make sense just to start from the door. It's always better, in my opinion, just to go and start with something where you have a nice view already. So, like, and especially in the case of renovations, people already know where they will be walking from. So they just can't wait to see like the whole room or the whole project. So, like with the first viewpoint, I'll go, oops, I had a bunch of viewpoints before, so I'll just go and delete them. Like that. So now I'll just go and add one more point. And then after that, when I go and put my second point, a couple of tricks when you set up your viewpoints, try to put like not too many points. I have a lot of people, like if you want to go from that corner to the other corner, they'll put like 4 different points. And what I'll do just to illustrate the difference, I'll just go and put a couple of points in between. So like that, you see right now I've got only 2 points. But, a lot of people just go and add a point like that, for example, here, and maybe like another one here. So just to show you the difference, if you put like too many points, what happens is that like the video will kind of just look broken. It just like stops and then starts again. As when I put only like 2 points, it will just be one nice long movement in between the 2 different points. So it's more fluid. So with the viewpoints, try not to put too many points, because like too many will just look like it doesn't know where it goes. Also, like the speed at which it starts and stops, is calculated with the distance on the floor between the 2 points. So, for that reason, for example, like if I go and put 1 point here and I don't move on the floor at all and just add 1 more point right here, you see like going from one to the other, like in the full flow of things, will seem to be like very, very fast. And that, like for that reason, it's just because we're not moving on the floor. So you see like just like shift like very quickly. So instead of just turning your head and adding a new point, what you want to do in this case would be simply just to, like, if you want to have that view, just like move forward just a little bit. And so I'll just delete this one. So you see now going from here to the other place, like it's moving towards it. Now probably not enough. So it was not slow enough, but you kind of get the idea from there. Then after that, when you put your points as well, like for example, if I go here on the like between the island and the wall of cabinets, try not to look on the left and then on the right and then on the left and then on the right. So I mean, like just try to show like the wall right there on the right side, and then after that maybe come back a little bit later to show like the inside of the island. So again, for the same reason, because when you look at that wall, if you start looking on the left and on the right and on all the sides, like people just get confused, and you'll probably end up just adding like way too many points. So in this case, again, like if I go from the other point, really what I'm focusing on right now is just that one wall of cabinet, that opening right there, that looks beautiful. And then, the camera will go close to the countertop like that, and just shows like a nice view. Something else as well that is, when you put your points, try to play with different elevations. So, you have basically when you set up your viewpoints, you've got viewpoints that will be saved for, as rendered images. So yes, you do need to have those really back wide views where you see everything. But in between those views, it's always a good idea to, go up, look down, go down and look up a little bit, change the angles. So, like again, your customer really wants to see it and realize like how open that room will be and how beautiful it will look. So after that, I guess going from there, maybe what I can do is just like, for example, go up again and show like a top view of the countertop. And from there, I'll just go down and show on the other side of my island. You know, something else that I really like to do, you know, is try to set up points where I'll just, you know, fly over my countertop and you know, zoom in on stuff. For example, if I want to look at that. So now if I look from the other point, like, yeah, right now probably just a bit too much inside of my faucet, but again, you get the idea where, you know, just moving close from the objects, zooming like very, you can do like the type of shots that you will see, you know, like photographs take or views that you would see in typical videos. You know, like types of views that I really enjoy as well would be, for example, when you're like behind the countertop, but you look at this at the living room, or, you know, you just get a better sense of you know, what will be behind that kitchen as well for the customer. Then for the video recording, when I click on settings here and go into video and photo, you see you've got resolution. Depending on the graphic card that you have, you will see either 720 and 1080, or you'll have like the 2K and 4K options. So like 2K and 4K will only appear if you have a good graphic card in your computer. If you have a very good one and you don't see those options, just send me a quick email. We can take a look into it. I always suggest everyone to go and record in the highest resolution possible that you have on your computer. In most cases, if you do have the 4K options, it will probably be faster than a 1080 on somebody that doesn't see the 4K. So, you know, like the better resolution, the better result will come out at the end. Frame rates is how many images per second will be recorded by the application. So this is something else I personally never bring down. You know, it makes everything a little more fluid, less flickering on the screen as well. There's a quality slider here. This one here, I'll just leave it at 100. It doesn't make any difference really to go higher than that. You probably won't be able to notice any difference, I mean. And then we have here the name and everything to be uploaded on YouTube, like that. And there's, yeah, so that's it for the viewpoints, the video, and the lighting. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to talk about, there is a feature inside the application. It's kind of a hidden feature that makes a big difference as far as lighting and reflections, and it's called the reflection probes. And the version of the app that I have today, I'm quite lucky because I'm just trying out the new feature. It will be a little bit easier to explain to you guys how it works and what it does, but just know that you kind of have half of that feature already, but it's hidden at the moment. So the reflection probes, basically what they are is that they are like in a software like Spaces, where we do live rendering, you know, like on the market, for example, like typical rendering tools will use a technique of rendering that they call ray trace. And with the ray trace, that means that, you know, like the software will calculate the light that bounce, for example, like the sunlight that comes here and will just light up my floor. On the ray trace software, that means that that light that bounces off the floor will be rendered on the cabinets here, because, you know, like the way that rate will just go down and reflect like that. In Spaces, all the reflections are calculated kind of one way only. So because we're live, like the computer will kind of explode if we wanted it to calculate all the ray trace like live when we're moving around. So to do that, all the reflections of the project are calculated from one central point that typically would be in the center of your room. So right now, you know, like just to show you, on my beta version here, I've got that ball here, that chrome ball that you can see. This is actually what the reflection probe is. So like this is kind of like one point, and everything that you see on that ball basically is what will be reflected on the objects. So in the software that you have right now, like I said, like you do have one reflection probe by default in every single project. It's in the middle of that room. And if you wanted to add another one, the way to do that is that you can go like in front of something that you want to have good reflections, and you just on your keyboard you go Shift and 1, and that will place the reflection probe number 1. Then you can go somewhere else and go Shift and 2 and add a second probe. Like I said, like you will not see it physically like that on your software yet, but like the effect of that probe will be there. And again, you know, just to show you a little bit more of what the probe does, I'll just change my cabinets here and put them in mirror so you have a better idea. And in my secret features, I can just increase the resolution here so you can see pretty much everything. So, you know, like right now, if I look like very close on that probe, you see basically what it shows here. It kind of takes a picture of everything that is behind me. So when I look on those mirrors, this is basically what I see there. On the version that you have, what we do is that we just lower the resolution so you can you don't see objects as clearly as that. But overall, like this is how it works. So, you know, like with the reflection probe, when I go in and put it in different place, you know, this is basically what will determine what will be reflected inside that room. So, you know, like sometimes if I take that probe and just turn it off, you see like my stainless and chrome will kind of be black because there's nothing reflecting, you know, anything on that stainless. So like the stainless will just kind of look black in that case. So if I turn it back on like that, you can see that my stainless looks very nice. So like I said, like, you already have that, the reflection probe. It's only that you cannot see it when you place it inside your jobs. But if you go Shift 1, Shift 2, Shift 3, Shift 4, and on and on like that, try not to add too many, you know, try not to go over like 4. What will happen is that if you put too many, it will just require a lot more performances out of your graphic card. So if you have a graphic card that is kind of limit, you might just end up crashing your project. So this is why we're just working on that that feature right now to make it a little easier for you. But yeah, this is what it is about the reflection probes. So I don't know if anybody has any specific questions. This is pretty much all the things that I want to mention or talk about today. If you have any questions, just go in the chat and ask me anything that you want. Otherwise, what I'll do, I'll just go in that chat and put my email address. So if you have any questions, just send me an email. That'll be it will be my pleasure to answer that. So Jake Blackburn, oh, like that. So. All right. So now you should see, you should have my email address in the chat. Like I said, if you have any questions, just go and send me an email, write me a question by email, or you can come and use a chat on our website. So thank you very much for the time you spent today with me. Hopefully it's been a good learning experience for you guys. So have a great day. Bye.